Carson Beck will push the Miami Hurricanes into the college football playoff. But don't take my word for it. Take Paul Finebaum's.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, if there is such a thing, but happy President's Day. Maybe you're off work today, so it is a happy Monday. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and writer for Canes County at Rivals. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. On this loaded episode, we'll talk about the Canes baseball 3-0 start a little bit later on. I know it was against inferior opposition at home, a series against Niagara, but Miami blew them out all three games, and the pitching was really solid along with the hitting. We didn't see that really at any point last year, because last season, even against inferior opposition, Miami didn't look as good as they just looked this weekend. We'll talk with our guy Raymond Bourg, our Canes baseball enthusiast, later on in this episode. Of course, we'll talk a lot of football, expectations for Mario Cristobal's fourth year at the helm at the University of Miami. And listen, Cristobal was getting praise, and Carson Beck was getting praise from Paul Finebaum, of all people. Now, once in a blue moon, this happens every now and again, Finebaum will have something complimentary to say about the Hurricanes football program, but it's rare. And anytime he does say something nice about us, you kind of feel like you're living in a parallel universe. Like, wait, hold on. That's Finebaum? Because Finebaum over the years, and even over the last couple of months, has been really harsh on the Canes. After this, 10-win season, but disappointing finish where Miami missed the ACC championship and they missed the CFP. Finebaum said about Miami, quote, "Miami always fails to deliver." He said that just a couple of months ago, right after the Syracuse game at the end of November that Miami lost. Finebaum referred to the Hurricanes as a fraud, one of the biggest frauds in the country. He referred to Miami as, years ago, I think this was during the Manny Diaz era, Finebaum once referred to the Miami football team as a quote-unquote third world program. And we always know with Finebaum, he's typically pumping up the SEC at the expense of the ACC and everyone else. So it's rare when and by the way, I respect Finebaum a lot. I mean, obviously he's prolific and, he's got a big time platform on ESPN and SEC Network. And every now and again, he says something complimentary about Miami. I think Finebaum does respect Mario Cristobal. And I think the reason why he respects Mario is that Mario used to work for Nick Saban, and Finebaum basically worships Saban. So he's got some respect for Mario. And clearly Finebaum has respect for Carson Beck. And the comments that Paul made about Beck, so complimentary to Miami for acquiring him, that a lot of Georgia fans are in their feelings about what Finebaum said, and they're not happy with the way Finebaum kind of characterized the rest of their team now that Beck is out the door. So this is really interesting. Georgia fans, who are, Finebaum's constituents, right? He covers the SEC, are not happy about what he's saying about Beck and Miami really propping up the Hurricanes. So in a conversation with On3 Sports, Finebaum was asked a question: if Carson Beck can be the quarterback that pushes Miami into the college football playoff. And listen closely, because Finebaum didn't just say he can be. Finebaum actually said he will be. He answered that question. I believe he does, Finebaum said. Quote, "Carson Beck is a very good quarterback who at times last year really helped bail Georgia out." And I'm thinking of that Tennessee game in particular. That was do or die. I still like him, he said. He had so little to work with. The talent around him was so different than the year before with Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, and he just never could adapt, and he just didn't look happy, he said. Maybe learning to drive a Lamborghini just really overwhelmed him. You guys, maybe you remember, maybe you don't, that after, I think it was heading in to last year, Beck, he made a lot of NIL money. He bought a Lamborghini. And so that was something that people were looking at after he had a little bit of a dip in his stats last year. But I thought Finebaum brought up the other stuff. It wasn't really Carson Beck that changed on the field. It was a lot of stuff around him at Georgia that changed on the field. The supporting cast, the blocking, the running game, not nearly as good for him in 2024 as it was in 2023, where he threw for about 4,000 yards in 2023, had a superior touchdown to interception ratio, threw for about 500 less yards, a lot more interceptions last season. So Finebaum, I think fairly, thinks that a lot of the other stuff affected Carson Beck, and it wasn't just a Beck thing. Finebaum said, he praised Carson Beck's decision to go to Miami. He said he was ill-advised to go into the draft, first of all, because of the injury and because there was never going to be a good read on that, Finebaum said. And I agree. I mean, Beck, with the elbow injury, would not have been able to partake in the combine or pro days. So NFL teams would have had to kind of go in blind in drafting him. So he made the right decision playing another year in college. So I think that made it easier for him to slip away than just going into the portal. Georgia fans were in some way fatigued with Carson anyway. They lost a better quarterback than the guy they have. So he's higher on Beck than he is on Gunnar Stockton, who's now there at Georgia. Finebaum concluded his statements. He says, I don't think it was a net plus for Georgia, but I think it was a big boost from Mario Cristobal, who I really believe has put a good program together down there, Finebaum said. I know it's been slow and it's been awkward at times. They literally threw away a playoff bid last year against Syracuse. And by the way, I agree with that, Paul. He will get it done down there, he said about Cristobal. And I think Carson is the key element. So, wow, I wasn't expecting that. Like, honestly, I wasn't expecting Finebaum to be that complimentary about Carson Beck. And you can imagine, because when I read those quotes of Paul Finebaum, courtesy of On3 Sports, Miami fans obviously can feel complimented by it. Georgia fans, they hear that and they read that, and they feel like Finebaum is trashing their team and kind of trashing everybody but Beck. I'm sure Georgia fans would say, well, no, Carson Beck was part of the problem. I do think there were a lot of problems around Beck, and obviously Georgia was still a hell of a football team last year. They got into the college football playoff. Miami didn't. But there were other reasons besides Carson Beck why they didn't go all the way last year. And I know one of the big points of contention that Georgia fans have, because I see them in Finebaum's mentions, like, hold on, I'm trying to do the accent. I'm sorry, but I have to try, okay? How come you're saying he didn't have enough talent at Georgia? You think he's going to have more talent at Miami? You think Miami's a better team than Georgia? Like, they're going after Finebaum for basically saying, hey, he didn't have a good enough supporting cast at Georgia, but he can win at Miami. There's a lot of context, folks, to that idea. And again, I'm not saying top to bottom of the roster that Miami's a better team than Georgia. I cover Miami. I'm very close to it, but I'm not delusional. But context is important, folks. And first of all, Miami's got a much easier road. They do have a pretty tough non-conference schedule this year, but Beck is going to have opportunities to do things in the ACC that are tougher to do against SEC defenses. For example, last season, the Georgia Bulldogs, one of the toughest schedules in the country, they played against 8 opponents. 8 of their 12 opponents had top 30 defenses in America. Miami last year, only 2 of their 12 opponents had a top 30 defense in America. Georgia, we talked about the receivers that he had in 24 compared to 23. The Georgia Bulldogs ranked dead last in the nation in dropped passes last year, meaning the most dropped passes from their receiving core. So there were a lot of plays left on the field that weren't Carson Beck's fault. Georgia ranked 102nd in rushing last year and just 4 yards per carry. Miami, in actually a pass-heavy offense, because I think it'll be a little bit more run-heavy with Beck compared to what it was with Cam Ward. Miami was 31st in rushing and 6th in the country in team yards per carry at 5.7 compared to Georgia's 4.06. So, again, there is context here, and I think Carson Beck, especially behind what should actually be a better offensive line at Miami this year than what Georgia had last year, going up against, for the most part, inferior defenses, right? You notice how many points get scored in ACC games. That's not a coincidence. I think Beck can thrive in Miami a way that he didn't in Georgia last year, but there's more to that. We talk about context. Miami's overall team, I believe, is better and has to be better because, again, Cam Ward last year had one of the best quarterbacking seasons, the best probably in Miami history, best in the nation last year when it comes to that quarterback position. And still, the team fell short of CFP and ACC championship. So, how do you get there this year with Carson Beck or anybody else at quarterback? Miami's defense has to be better. The team has to be more consistent. They have to play more ball control and run the clock more out than they did last year. And so, yes, other things have to fall in place to win with Carson Beck. But I believe Carson Beck is good enough, more than good enough, if a few other things fall into place, that he can and will lead Miami into a college football playoff spot. And it's crazy. I feel like I'm living in bizarro world to hear Paul Finebaum, of all people, saying that at the expense of making Georgia fans a little bit angry. Because listen, UGA last year, and the offensive line had a problematic year. Georgia's running attack was almost non-existent, 102nd in the country, led the nation in wide receiver drops. There's a lot of validity to what Finebaum had to say about Georgia. And despite all that, Georgia was right in there, and they got into the big dance. They won the SEC, and they got into the college football playoff. I can't wait to see Carson Beck in Miami. We're going to be answering questions from you guys on the other side, from the Locked On Canes insiders. Got a really good question relating to Carson Beck and what Miami would look like if he wasn't here, and if that's an indictment on Mario Cristobal. You want to keep it locked, my friends. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Guys, I've had a lot of action over the weekend, from Four Nations, NBA All-Star props, NBA regular season games are coming back this week. And when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay, which is a lot of fun. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or I'm picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is so easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On ACC. Going to have a new episode tonight. Kenton Gibbs and I host that show. We're going to have Brian Smith from the new Portal podcast on Locked On as a guest. We'll talk about how the portal and soon revenue sharing have changed the landscape of college football. So we're going to have a good conversation on that tonight. All right, so I want to answer questions from you guys. And if you want to become a Locked On Canes insider, click the link in the show description below. Try it free for 14 days. Get text messages directly from me to you and vice versa, questions and answers, breaking news, show updates, some rumors here and there to spice things up. Try it free for 2 weeks. Then if you like it, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. All right, we get this question, and it's a good one, from Jeff, who says, hey, just curious, Miami quarterback commit Darion Coleman is ranked as the number 25 quarterback in the cycle and a 3-star. What is up with 24/7 Sports? He says they have underrated so many players, including Luke Nickel, who should probably be a 5-star when all is said and done. I think Luke eventually got his 4th star on 24/7, but they were very late on that. He says everybody who has seen Coleman play say he is or will be one of the top quarterbacks in the 2026 class. I don't know why 24, and I'm not going to rip them because guess what? Like 24/7, I'm on that website a lot. I think the local guys do a tremendous job, and I get a lot of good information. I'm not going to rip them. I think sometimes with their player rankings, maybe they've been a little bit behind. I think in the case of Darion Coleman, like, to be fair, he's been a little bit of a late bloomer. So I give Shannon Dawson a lot of credit for being pretty early on Coleman, earlier than a lot of programs. Like Oklahoma was very early on Coleman, and then Miami was able to get in and flip him. And now it's going to be a lot of other schools that are going to try. I think Coleman is a Cane. He loves Miami. We're friendly with his quarterbacks coach who we've had on the show before. I think Coleman's going to be a Cane, but I think other schools are kind of getting into it a little bit late. And I think part of the reason why Coleman is a little bit of a late bloomer is like he recently hit a growth spurt, right? I mean, he was a lot of the recruiting sites still have him listed around 5'10", 5'11". Like he is legitimately 6'1" plus now. Young man has hit a growth spurt to go along with that arm talent. And I noticed, when he competed a few weeks ago in some of the big 7-on-7s at Battle Miami, for example, a lot of folks were taking notice of his accuracy and his arm talent. I mean, Balin Trujillo, his quarterbacks coach, who's coached a lot of big names over the years, has said this is the guy who has the best God-given arm talent I've ever coached before. So, I think eventually Coleman's probably going to get a boost on 24/7, and they'll come to their senses on the guy. But I think a big part of what was holding his ranking back was when people were thinking he was like 5'10" or 5'11", but he's legitimately 6'1" plus now, and I think he's going to continue to rise up the rankings. This is a really good question from BP, who says, "Hey, how concerned should we be that our win total, the Las Vegas over/under, that it would be 6.5 or maybe 7.5 if we didn't land Carson Beck?" And the number now is 8.5. Miami has landed Carson Beck, but he says, what does that say about Mario Cristobal in year 4? That, without Carson Beck, our win total would be somewhat low. I know what you're angling at. Like, you're angling at the idea that, like, how come we need to bring in quarterback saviors to lift up the rest of the roster? Like, how come the rest of the roster isn't good enough or deep enough when we have all these top recruiting classes? Like, I understand what you're angling at, but honestly, I think it's more of an indictment on past recruiting at that specific quarterback position. Here's the bottom line. If Emory Williams, who did not play well in that Pop-Tarts Bowl and concerned all of us as to what it would look like if he was the starting quarterback next year, that looks like an indictment on, that recruiting side, that era when Miami, recruited Jakari Brown, who's not with the team anymore, and Emory Williams, and, Jake Garcia was before this staff that was recruited by the previous staff, but that guy didn't pan out at Miami or anywhere else. Tyler Van Dyke, who was recruited by the previous staff, started out well and, hasn't panned out since then. So I think this is more of an indictment on Miami's quarterback recruiting than it is on it, because it's the most important position in football. Because, folks, there's a lot of other spots. So with Mario Cristobal's recruiting, I don't think you can say indictment. I mean, offensive line recruiting has been superb. I think receiver recruiting has been pretty good. We're going to find out a lot more about that this year. Defensive line recruiting has been really good in recent years. Linebacker recruiting has been pretty good. Defensive back recruiting, I admit, was lacking for a long time. I think they got a really good 25 class, and I have high hopes for the 26 class. We'll see if Seatbelt comes aboard pretty soon. We'll circle back to that one in a second. But honestly, I think really, to me, it's an indictment on a lot of quarterback recruits not panning out. And I think that's changing, because we are all very bullish on Luke Nickel, who was hand recruited by Shannon Dawson, is on campus now as a true freshman. And we just talked about Darion Coleman, who's going to come in 2026. So I think the tide is turning with quarterback recruiting, but quarterback recruiting was problematic. And listen, it's not just at Miami where you could say a great quarterback is worth an extra win or two. Like that's the case in almost any program in the country. So I'm not going to say that, like, Carson Beck raising Miami's win total. I don't think that's this grand indictment on Mario Cristobal, because guess what? Cristobal has recruited really, really well. Has everyone panned out? No. But a lot of players have and will. And I think past quarterback recruiting, I think that's where the indictment is, that Miami, unfortunately, missed on a lot of quarterback recruits from the Tyler Van Dyke through, and I don't even, like, it sounds disrespectful of me to even call Emory Williams a miss. We don't really know yet, but we know like he's not going to be the starting quarterback this year. But the past few years, the quarterback recruiting has not been up to par, and I think that's hurt you more than anything. I believe Mario is building a really good roster. I really do believe that. All right, let's see. We get a similar question from Tampa Lou, who says, hey, 2 years ago, Miami's offense struggled. Cam Ward fixed that. Ward extended many plays this year. I like Beck. Do you think we will struggle offensively like we did 2 years ago, especially when we are concentrating solely on the defense as we should? I'm just worried about our offense with so many new pieces. From Tampa Lou. Well, first of all, to say, will they struggle like 2 years ago? I am of the belief that Carson Beck is a lot better than Tyler Van Dyke. I'm gonna stand in the paint on that one. I strongly believe that. And Beck, he's not a wizard, at extending plays, but he has athleticism as well. So, and the other part of it with Miami's offense is I think we're in a really good spot with the running game combination of Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle at the top. So, I think the big question mark is Miami's got a lot of young receivers, some young tight ends. Can they rise to the occasion? Is Miami still, and we got another question somebody asked me about transfer portal targets during the spring. I think adding another top flight wide receiver is probably going to be right up there. Maybe getting another defensive lineman and another linebacker, but I think top flight receiver is a big one. So there's still some question marks there with replacing a lot of production from last year. But the offensive line, I think, is going to be in tremendous shape, and the running game should be really good to complement Carson Beck's passing game. So honestly, I'm not worried about the offense. In fact, I'm still, until proven otherwise, a little worried about the defense because I got to see it. Like I like the coaching changes. Will Harris, Zach Etheridge, Damian Lewis, Corey Heatherman as the coordinator. All the portal players that they added, like Xavier Lucas at cornerback. So I think they've done a tremendous job, but I still, I need to see the defense bounce back, honestly. Let's see. We get this is a good one. ITK wants to know, hey, who's replacing Andy Borregales this year at kicker? I'm thinking field goals are going to be important this year. What do you think the over-under for winning field goals will be this year? What if the line was set at 1.5 games to come down to winning? I don't know, but okay. As to the first question, who's replacing Andy Borregales? Borregales was so good. I believe we're replacing him with two people. I believe Abram Murray, who's going to be a second-year kicker that we recruited out of high school. I think he's going to be the field goal specialist because he's got a really accurate leg. And then a kicker Miami added through the portal, Carter Davis, former FAU kicker. I believe he's going to be the kickoff specialist because he's got a really booming leg. 81% of his kickoffs went for touchbacks last year. So I believe that Miami's going to have a kicker by committee. I think Abram Murray's going to handle the field goals and Carter Davis will handle the kickoffs. Now, maybe if you have you try a 57-yarder or something, you might bring in Davis's leg for that. But I think there's going to be a kicker by committee this year. In terms of, games that come down to a game-winning field goal, I mean, listen, Miami's got a tough schedule, like ACC games, like Louisville and SMU could be really tough, close games, out-of-conference games, Notre Dame to open the season. Florida, I believe, is going to give Miami more of a challenge than they gave us last year, despite the fact that we're taking their coaches and all their recruits. So, yeah, you could probably have maybe 2 games. I'll go over the 1.5, maybe 2 games that get decided by a final field goal. How's that? All right, folks, we're going to talk a little Canes baseball when we come back. Our friend Raymond Bourg is going to join us. Canes are 3-0. So far, so good. But you're going to have some tough series coming up. You've got Florida later this month. You got Wake Forest, Florida State series is in March. It's going to be baptism by fire over the next month for the Canes baseball team. We'll talk about it next right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Keep it locked. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Canes baseball team, I know our expectations are cautious with this new baseball season, but so far, so good. I know it's Niagara because it's not a series against Florida, but a 3-0 start at the light for your Miami Hurricanes and some delightfully good pitching, especially on Saturday and Sunday. Brian Walters getting double-digit strikeouts on Saturday. You had a shutout from Griffin Hughes, the transfer from Cincinnati, on Saturday, 10 strikeouts for him. We bring in our baseball guy, Miami Hurricanes baseball enthusiast, our guy Raymond, G.A. Kane fan, is with us. So, Raymond, listen, I know it's a long campaign coming up, but so far so good with the bats and the arms.
Yeah, so far it's been a good opening weekend. Niagara's a very weak team. They are, for everyone's reference, it is a D1 team. Most of the talent comes out of upstate New York, but it's not anybody on the level what they're going to play the rest of the year. But it's a good start, 3-0. They played New Jersey Institute of Technology last year, and they really struggled. So this was a better go-around, at least to begin the season.
Yeah, and I mentioned the arms so far. Miami's weekend starting pitchers, they're all 1-0 thus far, but pitching was an issue last year, Raymond, and I know that not a whole lot of enthusiasm coming out of Laz Gutierrez's staff after last year. He was retained as pitching coach this year, so should we have higher hopes? Again, knowing Niagara should not be the barometer, but can we have high hopes for the staff this year?
I'm really unsure. In fact, I have a lot of concerns of this season in general. I'm surprised there was no coaching change after last year. The biggest thing is I felt was the relief, and middle relief was horrible, and the way they were using the pitchers, it just didn't work out. They didn't bring in a lot of great talent this year. They've got some players here and there. I just don't know if they're going to be able to develop them. I didn't see it last year. In fact, to be honest, I thought it was a very disappointing season not to make the tournament.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. As far as the bats were not as much of an issue last year. And I was watching the Friday night game. We had Bobby Marsh, the transfer from Penn State, went 4 for 4 with 4 RBI playing DH. Miami did lose our guy Blake Shear from last year, who unfortunately went to Florida, which we don't like to talk about. But do you feel?
I think we should. I think we need to. I think the biggest thing is Shear supposedly was hurt with a thumb injury, if you remember last year. Yeah, and right.
Are you getting called for the bullpen there? Were you getting paid?
Yeah, I am. I'm getting pulled by my designated coach. Yes.
Start warming up.
Yeah, we're warming up, or be moving out. Anyway, he seemed to have a thumb injury. Now, there wasn't a lot of talk about why he was hurt, and all of a sudden, the transfer list came out from Baseball America. One of the biggest blows was the Miami Hurricanes. They lost Blake Slear, which had a great bat. They lost Jason Torres, which is a huge gap in the left. They also lost Antonio Jamiz as well, too. He's also left as well. It was a really huge blow this season. And I also think it also hurt them with recruiting. Granted, supposedly they were 8th in the nation, and 1st in the ACC, but I'm really not sure we really think these guys can develop them. I think this is kind of like a big make or break year for this entire staff, not just the pitching coach, but the JD. There's no doubt. Last season, let's talk about a little bit last season, if you don't mind me going into it. I know we've had we swept Niagara. Last year, their full season was 26-30. The conference ACC was 11-19. They kind of did some damage in the tournament, but nothing huge. Daniel Cuvée, had a great freshman year. Learned in the middle of the series of game 2 that he's actually draft eligible. I partially was surprised he didn't transfer out. I figured he'd get some more NIL money somewhere else and get him a team that actually make the playoff. But I think he's local, wants to stay around. But he's right now 2025 second All-American team in the Perfect Game website, which is really good if you enjoy college baseball or baseball in general. So high hope. That's our best bright spot. Hasn't hit, we'll see how many home runs he hit. I think hit about 28 last year. Did a very good job. Was the bright spot of the team. But we'll see how he goes this coming season. But he's going to have to carry this team, bottom line.
Yeah, no, I can certainly agree with that. And, we were talking a little bit off air about the early season schedule, so after Miami wraps up this 3-game home series against Niagara, they're going to have what could be a challenging midweek game in Boca against FAU. And then within the next couple of weeks, Miami will play a road series at Gainesville against Florida. Those usually don't go too well for us in recent years. They've got a midweek game at FIU in early March, and then late March they've got a home series against Florida State, which looks like they have a really good baseball team this year. So
and you're missing a bit. Yeah, you're missing a big series too. They also played Wake before Florida State at
Oh, that's
Winston-Salem,
right.
and Wake Forest is a
Yeah.
very, very good team who I wish we would have hired
Yeah.
their manager because he really wanted the job. So it's going to be a tough road to the season, but Florida State's the big one.
Yeah. Yeah.
My concern is going to be that's going to judge the season. We're going to know everything by end of March, early April, because Florida State's a huge team. They're the preseason poll. UVA was number 1. This is the media. Florida State was number 2. UNC was number 3. Then Clemson and Duke. FSU's loaded. Great team. Made the tournament. They gave us problems all last week. We played them tough. There was a real exciting series, but they are a team to beat. And the question, I really wonder if our pitching staff's going to be ready that early.
Yeah. I mean, how well does Miami have to do within the next, month plus? Because you mentioned, the series against Florida, Wake Forest, Florida State. Like how well do they have to do? And if things get pretty ugly, could that, not be a very good sign for JD and his staff?
They've got to show improvement, and I think they need to show improvement middle relief.
Yeah.
I'm concerned too a little bit. I'm a little pausing. I'm taking my time how to even put this politely, but I also have worries about they got to play FIU, they got to play Florida Atlantic, and they gave them trouble last year, and there's no reason to give them that much trouble. They've got to play well. They've got to be competitive. If they start getting blown out by the Gators, if they get blown out by Florida State, if they get blown out by Wake Forest, I mean, it's going to be a huge question. They've got to show improvement every week. I don't know there's a record that they can do it, but if I think they start playing poorly and it looks like this team's getting blown out and there's no energy there and the pitching stack keeps getting racked and they're going through the middle and middle relievers, I think JD's job is on the line. Truly is. I mean, he was a questionable hire by the end of last year, but there's got to be significant improvement. And my great concern, it reminds me, and I hate that you mentioned the name, apologize, Al Golden. He wouldn't make change on the defensive staff. And I'm starting to see the same thing with JD because there definitely showed there was pitching issues, and I just didn't see any changes on any of his staff. I think their pitching coach was questionable at best, and I'm trying to be polite because this is a family show.
Yeah, it sure is. So, hopefully this weekend, and again, Niagara, but hopefully this is a sign of things to come because I've enjoyed the baseball that I've watched. We appreciate Raymond's time. You know him as G.A. Kane fan. Make sure you guys smash the like button, subscribe. Let's hope the baseball team keeps winning because listen, I got a belly full of Mark Light Shake, and I'm happy they're off to a 3-0 start. So thanks so much to Raymond. Thanks so much to you guys. Smash that like button and subscribe. We'll talk to you again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.